The tapping of a dog's paws, their nails on the hardwood floor. I love that sound. Tiny dancers. There's something in this book that was knocking on my door. So within the story of the velocity of ink, later in the book, a character emerges named Oswald, or Ozzy for short. When I wrote Oswald, I don't know why, but I had this image of like Dave Chappelle with aging makeup on, like a really cool old looking Dave Chappelle. I don't know why, where that hit me, but it was just the manifestation of this feeling of Ozzy. He is wise beyond his years. I don't know, he's like I don't even want to say a monk. That cheapens him, I think. It's more like he has a complete understanding of of millennia and stardust and human nature and the nature of death and the nature of what needs to be done. And there's something going on that he can't quite describe, yet he knows exactly what it is, but his own human limitations kind of stop him from describing it without sounding religious or, whatever, because he's confused by all of it. So the stranger, his dad was a mogul. He was rich. He was famous. Back in the 1978, his dad was the equivalent of Elon Musk today, or someone like that. I can't think of anybody more immediate to contrast the magnitude of the stranger's dad. And it turned out that Ozzy was in the war with him, with his dad. But Oswald and the stranger and even some of the enemies, or the main enemy in the book, they're all like chosen from something, from space and time, loops and a bunch of weird shit. I'll put it to you that way. It's a book. It's not reality. It's not a real belief system. It's not a theory. It is just a way it was a way for me to create the atmosphere of this dark city, was what it was. And a lot of that came from Oswald's background. So back to the stranger, he was called to this quarter, this part of the city, away from his old city. And his fiancée had died there. The stranger bought up a lot of the properties around the quarter, hidden, right? So nobody really knew who he was because it was 78. The media wasn't like it is now. But everybody knew who his dad was. His dad died. He took that money and he went to this other city because he was on a mission, to say the very least. What happened was an old man applied for the cafe job, the coffee shop the stranger owned down the street, right on the edge of the quarter. It's a significant border in the book. And so Oswald called the stranger, and he called him by his first name. And nobody knows his first name in the book, or probably in life, really. He's just the stranger. Every character I've written, I know their entire backstory, even if it's only a couple lines in the book, or an obscure reference thrown their way. What if for some reason you're into something and that character needs to reappear? The character's strengths, weaknesses, in some cases, ways they can kill or be killed. Well, same thing, I guess. Ozzy calls the stranger, and he's with Arya in their kitchen, and he says, "Good noon from the coffee house. At the cafe, I need to talk to you." And the stranger's blood ran cold. He was like, who is this guy? Who's this old man I gave a job to? And now he's calling me by my first name, and I know him. I don't know how, but I know this guy. And it was a very creepy, but it almost frightened the stranger when hardly anything ever does. But now he had to go meet him and talk to him. And on the way to the cafe, the stranger just happened to casually kill a drifter trying to kill him. And Ozzy watched it, and the door closed, and he sat down. And I'll just kind of mix, match commentary and storyline, if you don't mind. And this begins chapter 33. Cafe door closed. The old man locked the door, flipped the sign. Across from the stranger at the table. The stranger, the feeling of the room, less than a moment in that pause, the details of hiring him, the knowing it was a man he would trust, the odd sense of family. The word profound, he would not have used it. In the old man, he sensed a feeling, placement within anywhere. Thinking back on it, when Oswald at first approached him with a phone call, one ad in the paper, out of the calls, the old man, his voice, a man in good health looking for a purpose, no care for what the daylight dreamed, a place humble to keep his life clear. The stranger, no need for process. The cafe would not be a successful one. He had simply bought it for leverage against something not seen. With the old man, the stranger sensed he would run the cafe on his own, live in back, handle business. In the quarter so busy, the stranger, he had learned from his father how to filter them, the faces. Who he was there, known to nearly no one. What he owned. His father, the way he had said it. Those who make it on any level of life, they keep their heads down into their work, quiet, aggressive. Once you get to the point where you don't have to hear anyone else's opinion, then you come up for air, you taste the good wine. For his father, the good wine was global success. For the stranger, it was obscurity. What his own father did not know about his son, had he have, the stranger would have seen him live longer. His father, too young to die, too old to live as long as the stranger could in regard to everything. In the air, the blood of his son, he would not believe it. If he had, his son would reject. Had the old man heard the timeline of Oswald, the obscurity of it, he would have only laughed. So when I thought of the cafe, I saw this. You walk in the door, there's a front door here, there's a window here, and a window here, like an alcove kind of. Like the door's not in the corner, but it's close to it. And then there's an old round wood table, and Ozzy with the window view, and the stranger with the front door view, and the cafe, which is empty. The light coming in from the quarter in the city, and the city is nondescript. It doesn't say where or what the city is. Some have said, oh, it's New Orleans because of the quarter, but it's not. No, it's not. And everybody who's read the book has a different idea of where the city is, but the truth is when they ask me, I don't know. I just pictured this part of a city. But that's the cafe I saw, and through the eyes of Oswald, the world of the cafe. He's old, but his eyes are so bright and alive. That's from where I built the character of Oswald, the way he is peered out of this old shell, but he was ageless. He was pure fucking light. Ozzy, across the table, into the stare, his eyes fixed, the stranger to face him, who he was, who they were now. To the stranger, do you feel it? Do you ever sit back and feel it up to now, where we are? The stranger, his stare softened. What was sent across the table of space and time, the dust within, the water of it, the air, all things around them in regard to time, a loop. The stranger, his question, why? Oswald, his smile, nothing there but information, seeping into the wood of the table, into the fingers of the stranger, his hands warm, out of the swirls, out of the weight, the man across, old no longer. The word had easily dropped from his mind, of it, the vocabulary, gone for good. Ozzy, his hands around the cup, hands of something not there. The stranger to his own hands, back across the table. You knew my father. I have never met you. Your father, beautiful man, ambitions undersold his potential, but for what he gave back, he broke even. You won't see him again. He's what the Egyptians called westing. Know what that means? The stranger, his eyes flared into the face of the question. I do. Well, not to put a culture or a way onto any of it, because that would be without sense. The stranger, coffee to lips, the taste. It was home. It was not from there. Outside, Ozzy watching the street, the skyline. A city alive. Alive like this before, it had never been. The city around the quarter, flouncing before the sickness of it. The man within. The sickness of the quarter. The stranger, his mind, what piped blood, the air above the city, the reach beyond. Across to the stranger, the smile of Oswald. You've never went west, and you won't. I will never see it either. When the body is done, men like your father, women like your mother, even the animals that take on our shine, our habits. West. At the table, the stranger, in his heart, his mind, now his soul, before his first take on Arya after the death of his love, his first, the soul, a game for children, what he knew in the eyes of Oswald, the source of it, the reason for any of it, any one path to it. It existed to no man, alive or dead. It existed outside belief or faith, two things that would not matter. There was no East. The question in the stranger, the gnaw of it, what he knew now, it was true, what he had felt throughout the life of him, of his own. Then what's the point, Ozzy? The man across, his eyes brightened, the question, he had been waiting for it, since before the stranger would understand. Oswald, his laugh. I don't know, I just don't. The how or why were never important. I just know right now this must be protected. Away from your emotion, I have to tell you. What he said to the stranger, the time they have alive, it mattered. The absent minds, the bad information from the writings of man, or the good information, from the vacant eyes of those who disdained attachment, to the murderous belief of those who condemned or killed for one ideal. The direction was the same for nearly all of them, west. Why people like them did not go west, he had no answer. What was clear at the table? The goal through time has been one, to simply love, to acquire that and to preserve time for whatever the source would be, unrevealed, and that would be always. For men like the stranger, the path to love, often it required death, men who were born to never go west. Oswald at the table, before he would go into detail, the stranger had to know that life did matter. This life, this now, it needed no reason. The stranger sitting across, the conversation about their blood, it had to stop. More time with it, Oswald had the years on his side. The door was as open now to the stranger as it was to him, as it ever would be. Within the room beyond, the question would spiral. So, side note here, when I said Oswald had the years on his side, typically that means you're younger than somebody else, but in this case it means he had the years on his side, the experience. He was closer to the next level, and he had been, more than the stranger is now or ever has been. Part of the subtleties of this book. The stranger, his love, Arya, what she was to him, in their lives to live and die regardless, a direction after would carry no weight to what they knew as true above soil, what the stranger knew without being told, what would destroy the sickness. The air above the city, the reach beyond would not be enough. Had it been, there would be no need for man. From the soil in the quarter, all things were able to die. The message in the cafe, to protect what was out there. The city, it would use him. At the table, the stranger, in recount of his being called over from the last place, the luck of the city, from the greed of those who made the quarter, their pride, their arrogance. Murder was the highest arrogance. What was being protected physically, Oswald knew where. To tell the stranger now, it would create static. The mystery of why, the mystery of the city, unknown, to remain unchanged that way. Ozzy, his cup, full from nowhere. The stranger did not ask. Ozzy, the man he had hired, where they were now. The smile of him to the stranger, the bad news in the smile. The people to build the quarter. Dead blonde, the man in the car with the hair, the bosses of them, the ones who went before them. No one was immortal. The stranger, off guard, he would be killed like anyone else. The body had limits, aside from its station. The people who built the quarter, on guard, hard to kill. Conventional murder in the quarter, it would not exist within brigandage. His woman, when Arya poisoned the blonde, her competence made her normal to drink. Arya would be his weakness. The people who built the quarter, when their bodies died, they did not go west. Arya, their flower dipped in blood, half of her of them, the other of him. The side for him stronger. To the quarter it was a matter of time. The bad news and the smile across from him, what the quarter knew was true. The stranger would only have her for the time alive. Arya, she would go west. The stranger sitting there, reckoning with her blood. The man across looked into his face. Ozzy. He had imagined through time past, through space. They had thought this before. He had to imagine. This life in his heart, he knew it only to be true. What was after, if he was on to anything, there was no memory of before. The trace of a feeling remained, a fixture in him, a fixture. It informed him who to love, who to destroy. Gone west, this would not exist. How he knew it to be true, it was without proof. The war between the city and the quarter, broken down in history, as it must be. Always a war, this war without end, without time. Why it had to be fought, the question to spiral on the other side of the door. To also remain true, at this point in time, death was more possible. For either side, essential to continue. When brigandage was complete, the quarter would absorb the city, the mystery of that place, the acts of the city within the quarter, manipulation of matter, of ground, the placation of the orders into brigandage, orders not yet possible. It had reached the limit. Day by day, man had made the quarter strong. The city, the life of the city, almost shut out from the quarter. The separation reflected in the smile where the boss chain ended, within the shine of it. The dust of a moon reflected. In the cafe, Oswald had felt the smile from above. The only thing that made him fear. The path up to it, maddened to learn. The information was simply not there for him. In the cafe, the stranger hit with something. The quiet of the table, the fear he had felt from Oswald, it struck within a thought of dust from far. The softened stare from Oswald. What was left to tell the stranger? The word moored to his wrists by a moon recessed. The same one the stranger had seen in neon before he would find his path to Aria. The stranger. Tell me, Ozzy. The man across, breath in to pause. What he had to tell a stranger, first it would be tempered. To tell him would set him in motion, put his mind to murder. He would also have to use a prelude to let the stranger know. The information was there before Oswald moved the quarter from another city, called to it based on it. To call the stranger over after, the way the city works against the quarter, the intent, the men it had to need. The word to open, spoken to the stranger, soft as possible. Pilar. His blood cold under the name. In his eyes, Oswald explained to him. The folder was a cover. The profile of Pilar, it had fit one type. 2 profiles with the same type, only 2, and she was one of them. The boss was to assign the managers of brigandage, a test of competence. The man the stranger had seen in the car the day of the blonde, his transplant was Pilar, his transplant to build for the quarter. The blonde had found Aria in the same week. Which came first, unclear. As the time developed the vehicles, what the quarter saw in Aria, what was absent in Pilar. Her mind older, her resistance to the wind, to the quarter to live, her place north where she had chosen. Working bet between the blonde and the other with the ring, a laugh between them to start, and no hard feelings after one initiative would be destroyed. Laid out by Oswald, across the table, only what the stranger would have to hear. What would be needed. To over-inform, to tell him what the air from above the true city had let him know, and to Oswald, his blood. The stranger, for him to reject would be the end. To let the stranger know he was hearing the truth with nothing left back, a job for Oswald alone. The omission, the success of it. It took everything out of him except what was left for their time at the table. The stranger, the night his love was destroyed. Called to the quarter, a reading, a writer she admired, the same cafe the stranger would buy, where they sat now. The stranger, his heart soaked by Pilar at a table, her coffee, listening to the author, a tear to push out, across from Oswald, his stare back to the stranger. I'm sorry. The stranger, man on fire, tear to burn hot, turned to smoke off his face. His look into Oswald. From the stranger, the eyes of him. He knew the city was right to call him over, and the stranger knew the love from the city was true. His heart back then broken, the break, the blur from the break to blend the city and the quarter as one. At the table, the eyes of the stranger burned into the man across. The only question left, who? Oswald hanging there, Nowhere to go except straight through. The truth to the stranger, what he had already felt. That dirtbag in the field, or the man with the hair that ordered the kill. At that point, the other transplant had taken Providence. That fucker had her killed because he couldn't handle losing to the blonde. Before you walk out of here to free his soul, you'll never get close to him to do it. The time won't be right until it is, and it's nowhere near now. I'm sorry. The stranger, what he knew in his heart to be true, how Oswald knew, no need to ask. The ones who never went west, they learned in their sleep. The two of them at the table, what Oswald wanted to say to wrap the night between them, the stranger already said it inside. What he had seen in Pilar, the people who built the quarter had seen. The justice to follow, frontier. The broken man the quarter would break to normal. Intervention, the fate of where Aria would sleep. The gift of that grace, her heart. The city handed it to the stranger. Out of the cafe, east across and north, toward the lights of the ambulance where the coroner had parked. The stranger, his mind on Aria, his look cast out to the city, behind him the quarter. Buildings ripped down by neon, and he knew he was never leaving. He was never leaving without one to burn up into the night. The screams to tell him it was time to leave. Well, truthfully, I didn't expect to read that whole chapter, but, sometimes when you tap into something, whether you're writing a story, you're telling a story, or listening to a story from somebody you want to hear from, and sometimes when you start watching a movie, you start reading something, you start watching a video, you start whatever, you can just never want to stop. It's interesting, isn't it? It's that when you find something you devour, or it devours you. This morning, in my case, a lot of it was the two characters, but a lot of it also was battling my elements in this place. There's a psychology that I don't think anyone really talks about, and I think it's a reason why a dedicated, uninterrupted space is so important. If you can see my waveform here, which you can't, you'll see spikes all throughout, where I had to clip the audio because I had to snap or clear my throat, and that's only because I'm battling airplanes, I'm battling a heater, I'm battling my dogs doing their dog noises, and all those noises being made, and the heater kicking on, and bumps, and little clicks and pops. You don't get that in a booth. And therefore, psychologically, you don't feel pressured to stammer, to clear your throat, to pay attention to a pop that doesn't exist in a controlled environment. So a lot of this read today for me was pure orneriness, being stubborn. Recording under a flight path is a pattern I'm encountering on the road, and I think that it's time to break the pattern. That chapter was fun for me today. Hope you liked it. I'm going to get out of here. I'll talk to you in the new video, and as always, take good care.